My GF cheated. I never let her forget. This isn't simply a vengeance narrative. This is a tale on how vengeance is harmful to both sides. Even now, a good revenge narrative makes me feel warm and effervescent on the inside. I think it stems from a college event in which I exacted retribution on a cheating girlfriend, and it felt good. I know I shouldn't be enjoying it, but I can't deny how good it feels. Even though I'm embarrassed to say it, it's definitely one of my favorite emotions in the world. So I chose to make this my first post since I don't share the tale very frequently. It's so extensive that it simply makes me seem horrible. I'm going to do my best not to create a picture in which my ex seems as horrible as possible, and I appear as innocent as possible. I want to express this as truthfully as possible, even if it means making myself appear horrible. Some background and backstory. At the time of this narrative, I was a Division I NCAA basketball player at school, thus. I traveled a lot, weekly in various towns and states, and my whole life focused around it. During the events of this novel, I was in the midst of a terrible drug and alcohol addiction. Years after this event, I became sober and enrolled in a program whose name can be found towards the front of practically any phone book. I'm sure many of you who are reading this are sober and realize how us addicts/alcoholics can be. This narrative is an attempt to explain a character flaw that arose as a result of the events in this story that led me down a very dark road. Nonetheless, I do not want for this story to come across as self-pitying. Finally, I was always a kind child who was never in trouble. My childhood was harsh, yet I was able to maintain an overall goodwill to others, and nearly always done the right thing or went the high road. I knew people cheated in relationships while I was dating, but at the time of this tale, I just put it up to other people, not doing things the way I did. I never imagined that would happen to me. I used to believe that since I was a 5-star boyfriend and had great taste in women, infidelity would never be a part of my relationship experience. I was naive. I had a lot of self-esteem and, like every man in his early 20s, a lot of hubris. The construction, I was in my junior year of university and had been unmarried for about a year after my high school girlfriend, and I had broken up after 3 years. That relationship was marked as a learning experience, and I now understood what to look for in my future partner. I would most likely marry and start my future with the next lady I decided to date. I know, I was young and naive, thinking I knew everything LOL. I had a crush on this girl at school. We'll name her Lisa. Lisa was seen near the campus sports complex, the university team's training grounds and locker rooms. Lisa was a standout on the track team. The different sports teams had parties on a regular basis, and I knew that the first one I saw her at, I'd introduce myself and attempt to talk her up a little to see where it went. I eventually run across Lisa at one of these gatherings, and we pass each other on the stairs. We exchanged glances, and she smiled at me. I struck up a discussion with her, and after some back and forth, we exchanged phone numbers. We began flirting in the traditional American manner, only implying things back and forth obliquely. For weeks, we gradually developed the relationship in this way. We were texting back and forth, implying that we were interested in one another, but keeping it cool so the other person didn't know we had a crush on them. She was on a break from her current partner, a prominent football player on the squad at the time. She ended up abandoning him entirely to date me. Obviously, this should have been a red sign, but keep in mind that I had a lot of arrogance. Her leaving him to date me gave me a superiority complex at the moment. I was doing well in sports, and as she was prepared to abandon this person for me, she would never abandon me for another. I was an idiot, Elmau. I can't tell you how much I adored Lisa. I was addicted to her, and had this strange sense of I can't believe my crush is also into me. I was so submerged and blinded by my infatuation on her that I overlooked so many warning signals, yet our relationship took off quickly. As a result, I didn't take a thorough inventory of why I loved her so much. Fast forward about 8 months. We are now formally married. Lisa had her own athlete's dorm room, but I was a few years older than her, worked full-time during the summers and part-time during the school year/season, had my own apartment near campus, and Lisa was essentially living with me. She would even remain there while I was out of town, which was about 3 or 4 days a week since we were in season, and the team was traveling all over the nation. Regardless, Lisa and I were madly in love. I had planned 2 enormous back-to-back parties at the conclusion of the season. One was for a teammate's birthday, Friday night, and the other was for my own Saturday night. They simply happened to be one day apart and landed on a Friday and Saturday night, Friday night, Lisa and I got drunk and had some unprotected. Lisa had a calendar app on her phone that tracked her menstrual cycle. She was sleeping and I was drunkenly remembering how she always wrote down when we had unprotected in her calendar, so she knew whether she should be concerned if she missed her period. Because she was an athlete, she often missed her period. My intoxicated brain told her she should mark it on her calendar now because we'd forget the following day since we were so messed up. So I jolted her up and said, "Can you enter in that calendar that we had unprotected?" It was around 5 a.m. at this time, and we were that 5 a.m. intoxicated when you're basically just weary. She unlocked her phone and launched the app. But before she could do so, she fell asleep again. So I had the phone while it was still unlocked and tried to figure out how to add it to her calendar myself. Side note, throughout our relationship, Lisa was continuously looking through my computer and phone. She was really insecure and had a lot of doubts. I didn't mind that she did it all the time. She never discovered anything since I never did anything dirty. Again, looking back, this was an apparent red signal that I ignored. Remember how I assumed she would never cheat on me? So this wasn't one of those situations where I searched her phone for anything and then found it. In this occasion, I was inebriated and attempting to traverse this dumb period calendar, and I was not suspicious at all. When I glanced at Lisa's phone's period calendar app, I saw all sorts of small markings on various days of each month. Because each marker had a different color, I opened one to figure out what the color coding indicated. I saw that red clearly represented her menstruation, and that there were also black markings that indicated when she had unprotected intercourse. My heart dropped into my stomach at this point. This calendar was packed with black markers. It looked like a checkerboard, with barely a few red pieces remaining in all the black ones. There were black markings on dates when I was playing basketball in another place. I then proceeded to open all of the black markings dating back to the beginning of our relationship. We didn't have a lot of unprotected, maybe once or 2 times per month. In the notes portion of the black markers, she had written the names of the males she had unprotected intercourse with. Throughout the course of our relationship, she permitted a total of 4 males to enter her raw. There were hundreds of those nasty black markings in some months. Sometimes there were TWO in a single day. Looking back, I'm curious whether there were more unlisted males that I missed since she obviously only kept track of the people and times she had unprotected. Almost every infidelity scenario I hear includes the discovery of text messages, being alerted by a friend, or the classic arriving home early and catching your spouse red-handed. In contrast, I uncovered a well-documented ledger of practically every time she cheated and had unprotected. One of the 4 males I found was her ex, who she had left to date me. Cheating on me with him was commonplace. She was plainly sleeping with another unknown man on a regular basis. The final 2 gentlemen seemed to be one-time events, but as I previously said, these markers were just the times she had intercourse without a condom. So nobody knows what the real story was. I quickly regained consciousness. I went through Lisa's messages and phone conversations and discovered nothing. However, at the time, Android phones included a folder where you could view deleted text, but not the messages' contents. She had thousands of deleted messages and calls, but I couldn't read what they said. I noticed the numbers and did a fast Facebook search, and one matched her ex, as well as a half-dozen other odd males. The worst thing was that I discovered TWO of my colleagues, one of whom I was really very close to. After a few minutes, I just hung up the phone. The evidence was overwhelming. My insides started to ache the more it appeared to glance at the phone. I was completely defeated. I can't really articulate how I felt, but I'm sure everyone reading this who has found a significant other cheating understands what I mean. I felt dumb for believing her and having no reservations about her. I couldn't stop thinking about how I wished I hadn't cheated on Lisa every time I got the chance. I felt stupid for not cheating on her when I could have. My devotion seemed like a squandered opportunity. I realized that seems absurd and has nothing to do with the fact that she was unfaithful. I suppose I was preoccupied with it because if I hadn't cheated as well, it wouldn't have hurt as much at the time. All I could think of was how badly I was injured. I would do everything to avoid the agony and shame. Question: am I the only one who felt this way after discovering their lover was cheating on them? This piqued my interest. I then left my flat and went for a lengthy stroll. I'd never felt the feelings that were surfacing before and didn't know how to deal with them. My ego felt like it was being demolished right in front of me. I didn't know what to do and was too shy to tell anybody. My despair swiftly gave way to rage. I knew I was going to exact my vengeance, I simply didn't know how. I was seething with wrath and wanted to make sure she never recovered from what had happened to her. My roommate/teammate and closest buddy at the time, who was sleeping on the sofa in my living room, we'll call him Bono, an Eastern European guy who stood 7 feet tall and had the most Russian manner you could imagine. He also had a similarly ludicrous real-life name, hence Bono. Well, Bono phoned me shortly after I began my stroll. I replied, and he inquired as to my whereabouts. I requested him to keep this between ourselves and informed him of what had occurred. He hangs off the phone and walks into my room, where I hear him shout at her in Russian, "Hey, you cheated on OP." Then I hear her utter something inaudibly in the background and him shout at her to get out of the flat. After hearing some scuffling, Bono returns to the phone and says, "Hey, she's gone, come back and let's speak." I return home and we discuss what transpired. Things don't become mushy since we're both total alpha guys from cultures where men don't weep, and neither of us knew what to say or do in this scenario. He tries his hardest to console me and says, "We're going to get up and get you some for your birthday tonight." Jeez, I never liked her in the first place. Oh, today was my birthday. I forgot about that. I'm going out to breakfast with Bono. I'm still a touch tipsy. Lisa's phone is ringing and texting nonstop. I tell her I saw everything on her phone and that I can't bear talking to her looking at her. She continues trying to persuade me to let her attend my birthday celebration, but I make it obvious that I do not want her there. She was obviously disturbed about what Bono had mentioned to me earlier in our conversation. Lisa's whole reputation and status hinged on her relationship with me. Most people probably didn't like her in the first place, but tolerated her since we were together. She knew if I pretended to be single at my birthday celebration and she didn't show up, everyone would suspect something was wrong. Lisa, I believe, was more concerned with not being humiliated than with our relationship. I don't recall much of what occurred that night, but for my birthday, one of my pals got me a little box from California with some very fine cannabis, hash, moonrocks, pills, and the devil's dandruff. And I proceeded to make a spectacular swan dive into inebriated oblivion. All I remember is sitting on my chair at my party's pregame. I still have a snapshot of that time with 2 females perched on the arms of the chair, and I remember it well. We were getting ready to go. I had a couple tables at a prominent nightclub downtown. The only thing that made me feel normal was the drink and drugs. I was wearing my sunglasses and had that joyful loaded smile on my face. The more you stare at the picture of me on that chair, the more you can see I'm suppressing a lot of pain. Sitting in that chair, the medication mixture begins to take effect. This was the first time I took narcotics to feel better rather than to party. In order to make myself feel normal, I recall thinking, this is how I want to feel for the rest of my life. I'm never going to be in pain like that again. I have control over drugs and no one can ever harm me again. Oh, how ironic that turns out to be years later, when my teammates and friends wondered why Lisa wasn't at the celebration. I informed them that Lisa and I were done, but I didn't tell them why. I also didn't show them that I was impacted in any way and simply seemed to be unconcerned. I attempted to keep everyone's attention on the upcoming celebration. Stay tuned for the next part.